Today on Newsday.
The reason we were so successful during the pandemic is because we did one thing at a time.
Right.
Period. If you want me to do all 5 of those things in a year instead of 3 years, then give me the resources to get it done.
My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week Health, where we are dedicated to transforming healthcare one connection at a time. Newsday discusses the breaking news in healthcare with industry experts. Now, let's jump right in. It is Newsday, and everybody's sporting a hat on this week's Newsday. It's me, Drex, and Sarah. We're going to do our version of a Newsday roundtable, and looking forward to it. Boston hat. We've got a Warriors hat. We got a This Week Health yellow hat. You guys were in Boston last week. What did you learn at the 229 roundtable?
It was great. We had an awesome time in Boston. Some really amazing executives showed up for both the CIO roundtable and the CISO roundtable. I can tell you in the CISO room, it was a tornado of amazing ideas and some really brilliant connections. We had dinner together, all of us together one night, and that was a ton of fun. And then I know that Sarah and I and some folks, Kate, went to the Boston, Minnesota ball game on Saturday afternoon. So we were able to kind of do some cool stuff. But how'd the CIO table go, Sarah?
I'm going to go backwards and say, loved going to Fenway Park. It had been on the list of places to visit. We get rained out. We go across the way, watch the Derby, saw some more of our friendlies over there. So that
I'm sorry, where did you go across the street? You went to a bar, didn't you?
We did.
I mean, we're in Boston. That's what's all around Fenway. So when in Boston, kind of a thing, and ate lobster rolls at one point, which was another major highlight. Here's what I loved about the CIO table. Number one, tons of heavy hitters. And when you can get a lot of your friendlies or your friends or whomever into a room at that level, it's super powerful. Here's what I wasn't expecting, that some of the biggest health systems in America talking about budgetary constraints, talent management, and governance, because they're in that crunch time, and being able to apply the fiduciary expertise, the decision-making capabilities, and keeping the people engaged during those hardest times. It's not something none of us have ever seen or done before, but when you're seeing it in full force, the differentiator in today's world is the fact that the technology is actually there to accelerate and help us with those aspects of what is happening. So for the first time in about 20 years, we're actually seeing the technology delivering the solutions that are letting us keep up with the pressures that are occurring from every other dynamic in our industry.
All right. I want to talk about governance. Governance keeps coming up, and there's 2 schools of thought here. One is there's a school of thought which is like, I can't believe we haven't wrestled this to the ground yet. And the other school of thought, and I'm hearing this more and more from, pretty well-established CIOs, the health systems have gone berserk in their thinking. Just logic be damned. I don't care how busy you think you are. We saw what you did in the pandemic. Like, we thought this was going to be a problem, but I think it's starting to play itself out now, where leadership teams across the country are just saying, yeah, I don't care. We have to get a lot of stuff done. We expect you to get an EHR implementation done, an ERP implementation done. By the way, if you could consolidate our PAC systems and all these things that we know are 3-year projects. And, oh, by the way, you have 3 years to do all of them. We're hearing those kinds of requests come down. And sometimes when I hear them, I just sort of scratch my head, like, how are we supposed to get in front of that as healthcare leaders, as health IT leaders, when healthcare leaders aren't willing to get in front of it either? This is, by the way, this is an impossible question, but that's what I want to talk about a little bit. Sarah, we'll start with you. Since you're sporting the Golden State hat, nice hat, by the way.
Thank you. I love the playoffs. I watch all the games, by the way, because it's just super exciting. Here's a couple aspects from what you just shared, and this is where I get a little fired up on it as well. The reason we were so successful during the pandemic is because we did one thing at a time.
Right.
Period. Now, if you want me to do all 5 of those things in a year instead of 3 years, then give me the resources to get it done. And there is a business case that can be made for that. Okay, you want us to run on these cylinders, et cetera. But this is something that Drex has been sharing forever. It's that relentless prioritization. You can only do so many things well. And what I'm always fascinated by is that your CFO is the one who's always going to be hardcore on, we have this much money, we have XYZ to get things done. That dynamic is the same when it comes to pushing through the different initiatives that are in your health system. So any way possible, using your CFO relationships to understand that the operationalization of any of these things just takes time and money. And you can kind of buy time if you add the humans to it. But my favorite thing I've said for years is 9 people can't have a baby in 1 month. So have an expectation and understanding of what true capability is with the quality that's expected of the name associated with your healthcare system. So if you're known for delivering high patient outcomes, quality, et cetera, then the products that you're producing need to have that same ethos. The thing is, you got to be able to have the structures to make it happen. So may not be a popular answer, but if you want me to do 3 things really well, then give me the runway, latitude, people, funding, whatever that looks like, to make that a true statement.
I'll push back on that answer just for fun. I agree with your answer, but I'll still push back on it later. Drex, what are your thoughts?
A lot of this to me sort of boils down to we have never been, this is a gross generalization, we've never been really great at business plans when it comes to this list of projects. And a lot of it is just people seeing things and saying, I want to do this project, I want to buy this thing, I want us to do this work. And there's not a great business plan tied to it. There's no ROI. We don't understand what the OpEx tail is going to be over the years after the implementation. We haven't set up the long-term budgeting about the benefits. So if it's somebody from the pharmacy coming with a project, and one of the ways, even if they try to justify it, they justify it as we're going to eliminate 2 FTEs each year for the next 3 years by doing this. We don't keep track of whether or not they actually did that. We don't hold them accountable to those results. And the result of that is that there's a lot of things in these projects that it's just like, we can do that, and the cost, or the part of the organization that accrues the benefits, the cost accrues to the information services department. The cost and the pressure lands there.
But none of the benefits do, right?
None of the benefits do. And then this is one of those things where I think ultimately you've got to figure out how to force your clinical business and research operators to be better business people, to generate those good business plans. That becomes part of the prioritization process, not only prioritizing the work for the information services department, but how many times have we seen somebody coming with a project and the project gets approved, and it turns out there's so many things going on in the lab that they can't really eat another project themselves, but they got it approved, and then it starts to fail. And because it's an IS project, it becomes IS's fault that it didn't work. So there's so many things that have to be sort of read into this prioritization, governance conversation that we are chronically bad at a lot of healthcare systems.
By the way, I agree with that answer too. I'm going to push back on both of you. So for starters, if you're going to put together a governance program and you can't tell me the amount of resource planning it takes to do that project, and you're just sort of spitballing and you're off most of the time, it's no wonder that they sit in these governance meetings and go, yeah, whatever. Like, you've never been right about this since day one. You don't even track hours. You don't even know how many hours it's going to take.
Right.
That kind
That's
of
a
stuff.
good one.
So if you don't get your crap
House in order.
Yeah. If you don't get your crap together, don't go into the meeting and say, hey, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. It's like, you know what? Show me we can't do it. And the second is, we're not owning the narrative as CIOs. And so, and I know that you guys both have owned the narrative, so I'm not pushing back on you per se, but I'm saying we give CIOs too much cover for this. They need to own the narrative. They need to understand what they're up against. And what they're up against is they get a significant amount of budget money. And so the perception to the unwashed masses, to the people who cannot understand the budgeting, is, oh my gosh, I can't believe we spend that much money in IT and the systems look like this. Well, to a certain extent, we have to own the narrative. We have to be able to tell the story of, you know what, this is where we're at today. This is where we could go tomorrow. This is what you're going to get for these things. And the second part of the narrative we need to own is we need to push back on the organization and essentially say, look, we're not the problem. Every one of these projects is an operations project. You want me to roll out ERP? I need umpteen million hours from finance, from HR, from whatever. You want me to get on foundation? Great. I need this many clinical hours. Getting on foundation from a technology perspective, yeah, okay, no problem. That's not the problem. The problem is operations. The other part of the narrative I want to own is how much money we are wasting as a system because we're unwilling to lead as a leadership team. We're unwilling to lead and get in front of the operational mess that exists. And so I've written some articles on this and I've gotten a ton of pushback. We're not developers. We don't code, that kind of stuff. Fine. You don't have to code. Fix your operations. The only reason I was doing code was to fix, we can't get operations to fix their crap. Therefore, we have to write code
we have to create some kind of workaround
exactly
to make that work. And all of this is complexity. All of this, it just piles on itself. The more complex the environment is, the more complex it becomes, the more money that it takes to run and maintain it, the more likely it is that something's going to break and go down, and the harder it is to secure. All of these things pile into each other. And so that simplification program, two things: prioritize and simplify. In the heat of the battle of the financial crunch, I feel like that's here and definitely coming on. Prioritize and simplify. That is the way to find your way through the woods. That you're good. It's going to get really dark before it gets light again, I think.
Sarah, curveball to you, because you were at Tivity. And when you were at Tivity, you guys were writing code, you were building apps, you were doing all sorts of things. Now, it's healthcare adjacent. It's health, not necessarily healthcare. And so somebody's going to look at that and say, well, you don't have these challenges. But still, you guys looked at it and said, you know what? We are going to go to a DevSecOps kind of operation and save money and go to those approaches. Why did you choose to go that route? Why did you choose to go with, I mean, you could have very easily gone the standard off the shelf. I'm just going to go out with my checkbook and buy some stuff and put it together in a way it works. Why didn't you do that?
I'm going to just rewind you for a quick second on that. That wasn't my first CIO job, by the way. I'd been through Optum. I've been through HCI. I've been through like the big, giant, messy community governance committee, only to have the direction change 6 months later and you wonder why we never got anything done. That's not bad-mouthing those organizations. Actually, I'll always go on record of saying that HCI is the best run company that I ever worked for. And I learned a lot there. Anywhere I've ever been, I've had ninja developer teams. So Tivity was mostly developers, and we did all that work for a very specific reason. I had air cover from my CEO who hired me to do a full transformation turnaround plan with anything I needed to get it done, so long as it was well thought, well planned, tied into the overall strategy, and achieved all of the OKRs that we had on the books. And so it's exactly what we did. Very thoughtful about the approach. Now, did we get a ton of pressure because the operational readiness, back to your point, IT is the only part of the organization that tracks their capacity based on how their time is spent. At least in anywhere I've ever been, IT is the only place that is that pedantic about how much time we spend on capital versus OpEx, because that's how our time gets billed out and split. And most of our other parts of the organization, including product teams, don't typically run that way. So I know exactly how much capacity I have for a network team for deployment.
So wait, so since you're doing coding is an inherent activity that you do that a lot of healthcare systems don't do because they buy commercial off-the-shelf software, do some modifications, and then field it. Is that kind of the point I'm hearing?
Yeah, like go have your EMR, go all Epic, go have a couple of platform things. Have a ninja team that does these little tiny dev projects everywhere. I did that even at HCA. The division structure didn't lend itself to having coding teams. Guess what? Instead, a couple developers who could go in and solve all kinds of mini problems all the time.
Did Marty know you were doing that?
He did, and he did know I did that, and he would let me because I produced results. I mean, if you do everything you're supposed to do, you get a little bit of leeway to go do the other things that you want to be able to do. So this is going to go back to the other view of the universe that's important, and this came up at Tivity and everywhere I've ever been, is we were only maybe 2.5%, 3% of total cost, which is not much. I did a full picture. This is what that gets you. You want more? You want to be Netflix? Netflix is 27% of their spend into their R&D and technology. We do 3%. This is what 3% looks like.
Yeah, I was looking at that number because William Walters brought that up in the meeting. The age-old Gartner, I think the Gartner thing was done in like 2017, 2018. And it showed that healthcare had a lower perception of innovation than the post office.
Yes. Woo! Yay.
That's tough.
Get out the Pony Express.
It's interesting too, though, and I would say one other thing about that. And this came into a whole benchmarks conversation that we had during the summit last week. There's a lot of IT spend that's hidden in other places in the organization that you may not find just in the information services.
Okay, where is that hidden?
Well, in those little black operations that are going on around the organization.
Okay, I'll give you one
thing.
area where it's just hidden at St. Joe's, which was the number of people that held the title business analyst across the organization that didn't report into IT.
For sure.
It was over 100. It was.
They got cubes everywhere. I don't mean like physical cubes. I mean like cube software capabilities.
Story for another time. But essentially, we counted them all, and then we realized, oh, they can be outside IT. That's fine, but we have to figure out a way to bring them into the fold in terms of
So
how
did that make you 5% or something like that?
But
when you added them in?
We brought them into the fold, but we did not add them into the, but you're right. 100 people, let's say, I don't know, Southern California, let's say 70, 80 grand a piece. That's like real money. So your point, your point
but
is
there's
well
also software and there's other things that are going on out there too that don't accrue to the IT budget. So anyway, that just...
All right. So the next conversation I want to have with you guys, and let's be careful on this because we know specifics that we can't share.
Right.
My gosh, the number of CIOs who are moving one seat to the left is probably unprecedented. It's a significant number. And I'm trying to think of the most constructive way, most constructive way to have this conversation. I don't think it really matters why it's happening. I think the question becomes, all right, you're starting off a new CIO or you're looking for a role. Talk to me about the interview process. Drex, if Sarah and I are doing the interview right now, we're bringing you into a medium-sized health system, let's say $3.5 billion, regional IDN, and we're interviewing you. What does that look like? I mean, what are your expectations? What are you asking? Do you care what happened to the last guy?
Yeah. Well, you talked about owning the narrative, and I think about the interviews that I've gone through, like the first interview. And I think the first pass interviews often, the execs that you're interviewing with, maybe a group interview, they have sort of like a set of questions that they probably worked on with the HR guy or lady. And that's what they're using to sort of ask the questions. And I think you come into it pretty quickly, like you can answer questions, but I've got a lot of questions, right? I don't know that this is the right place for me. I think there's some early indicators that it might be. But there's a lot of stuff I need to know and understand, not only about the department and the spend and maybe what happened to the last guy, but I also want to know about you and how you are as a teammate. How's the boss? How do you guys work together? How have you resolved some really major conflict recently? Tell me about that. Oftentimes I wound up in these interviews where I was asking most of the questions and they were talking about their organization. And at the end of that first interview is usually when you get that we're going to need for you to come back.
You get the feel. Sarah, I'm going to change the question for you. Most of these start with the executive search firm, right? Mm. So that's your first conversation is with them. What does that conversation look like? What are you trying to find out from the executive search firm?
I really want these processes to become like what we do for bringing a new solution in-house, where if you've got your security risk questionnaire, I just want to hand my interview questionnaire out first, just so you know what I'm looking for, if I'm a good fit.
But they're gatekeepers. They are gatekeepers for sure. They can keep your resume from getting...
And if they can, but that's also into the mix of why you build your network out around that space as well. But I tend to find out, and this is what I tell every recruiter, if after a couple rounds of conversations, if I am not your number one choice, I don't want to be in the mix, period. Don't even waste my time, because I'm not going to help you be successful if you are not also interested in me being your number one candidate. And that can be an awkward conversation, but I've also been in scenarios where I said, am I the first choice? And they said, no, because of X. I said, remove me from the list. Keep me in mind when this criteria is true, then call me back. And that actually happened in one of the opportunities that I had. I've never ever been placed by a full-on recruiter once. Everything else was a connection from somebody else or somebody I already knew. And so that's why I'm such a big fan of having very thoughtful, very well-established networks, because end of the day, even if you're getting the call from one of the big recruiting firms, you're already a known quantity somewhere in that mix. And so utilize your relationship capital and your business acumen to really be the front runner for you in an opportunity.
Hey, Bill, let me ask you a question. So part of this interview process, when you get in and you start asking questions as the interviewee, is based on your previous experience and the stuff that you saw your previous organization not doing well. What are some of the questions you would ask when you go into these interviews?
By the way, I'm the worst interviewer in history. I get all of my jobs I've gotten because people have worked with me before, and they essentially said, "Oh my gosh, he's going to make me look good, so I want to bring him in." And I kid you not, like any job, and I rode that all the way up to the top in most organizations. But I am an awful interviewer because I'm so jaded. So you can't go in like I would go in. There was an interview with a major health system on the East Coast after I left St. Joe's. And I got to the interview round where you're going to talk to like 15 people on site. And the second interview I had was with the CMIO. And he put the plan together and he said, "Hey, here's our plan. This is what you need to do," that kind of stuff. I said, "Well, would you like some comments on the plan?" He goes, "No, not really. This is the plan. This is what you need to do," and whatever. And I said, "I'm sort of getting the vibe here that you just need somebody to carry out an already perceived plan." He said, "Yeah, no, that's exactly what we need." I said, "Yeah, I'm not your guy. I'm not your guy. And I don't want to waste anybody else's time because, people don't hire me to implement things. People hire me to look at a plan and identify a better plan. And I can still implement it. I'm really good at implementing. But if you're hiring me and telling me to shut off the greatest value I have to your organization, we're done." And I left there. The recruiter was so ticked off at me. I mean, I can't begin to tell you they were yelling at me over the phone. Like, you got to get back in there. I can't believe. I'm like, why? Why waste everybody's time? So I'm not
ruined my big payday.
What's that? Yeah,
you ruined my big payday.
I'm sure he ended up getting the placement, and the person who went in there was perfect for that. Like, here's what I credit the organization, and this is where I struggle the most is most organizations don't do the hard work of getting everybody who's going to do the interview on the same page. We are looking for this kind of person. Generally, what they're looking for is what they didn't have in their last marriage. So this is like their second marriage or third marriage. And they're saying, "Well, my first person I was married to was this. We know we don't want that. Therefore, we want this." No. What do you need? Like it's not a marriage. It's a health system. What do you need? Where are you at in your life cycle? And they haven't done that work. And so what happens to me in the interview is I start asking questions. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. And I'll just start poking at it. Like, you guys don't really have a good governance process. I don't understand how that works. Oh, you're going to keep the old CIO around and hire a new CIO? What does that look like? Who does the CIO report into? I mean, that was one of my things, one of my interviews where they were like, "Yeah, we're going to keep the other guy around." I'm like, help me understand why you would do that. It's like, well, it's like an insurance policy. I'm like, okay, well, no. I've also, with recruiters, I've been told, "Hey, stop returning your phone calls towards the end of the process." And I'm like, this is really weird. And we finally get them on the phone. It's like, am I being held around so that they can finish negotiating with somebody else to make sure that they land them? And if they don't, I'm the fallback.
Back to Sarah's backup plan. Yeah.
I'm not number one. Don't put me in the mix.
I agree. One of the things I would tell people who are interviewing is there's an awful lot of jobs out there right now. Like, you don't have to take the first one. If you are competent and good and believe in yourself and believe you can bring value, find the right organization that's a good fit and be honest with yourself. Like, what do you bring to the table? And is the organization looking for that? And if there's a mix, if there's a gap, don't just go, "Wow, that's going to look great on my resume," and whatever, because it may not look good on your resume when you get in there and it's not a good fit.
Well, and you might be looking at a relo and 2 or 3 plus years. And that's not just, let's be honest, we're all over 50. Like, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun right now.
Well, is relo necessary anymore? What?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to hard yes. If you are running a healthcare system, I certainly hope you are on site just about every single day, because your responsibility is to the patient and the clinician, and they don't get to dial it in.
Wow. Hey, Drex, what do you think of that? I know some CIOs that aren't on a site every day. Sarah's saying, "Hey, slacker, get back in the office."
I may ruffle some feathers saying that, but here's the deal. And this is where I'm like, I'm now that person. I'm over 50. I went into the hospital every day. I spent days, hours, and a change of clothes and a toothbrush, because sometimes you don't get to go home when bad things happen. And that taught me so many things that were so important. I actually want to be close to that environment. And I've even tacked on to one of our upcoming city tour dinners, staying a day over and going rounding with the team and creating basically like an on-site interview as part of them showcasing what they're doing in their hospital, because I don't get to do that anymore. And that's the industry we serve. So kind of need to be a part of it.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, So taking another little sort of slide on this, we are all really committed and we're very involved in the job when we're in those jobs. When someone loses their job, the thing I've heard us all kind of say to those people is that 99% of the time it doesn't have anything to do with you. It doesn't have to do with you being a bad CIO or a bad CISO. It's probably some other mechanical thing that's happened. A new CEO has come in. There's been a merger and acquisition. There's been some kind of change that has created the need for a reorganization, and you just are not part of it. Even when it's really clear, like why and how it happened, and it didn't have anything to do with you, I can tell you I had conversations with 3 or 4 CIOs this week who are in transition, and every one of them said, it still felt personal. It was still a punch in the gut. Even though I know it didn't have anything to do with me, it still hurt my feelings. And the reason it hurts your feelings is because you're really involved and engaged in your job and in your company and in your team. And good for you. You absolutely should be that way. But we talk about misery loves company. Enjoy that for a short little while and then let it roll off you and get back in the game, because there are so many other great opportunities. You have so much skill that you don't even realize that you have. Most of the CIOs, many of the CISOs could be chief operating officers or presidents of hospitals today. They just haven't extended themselves into that space. Yeah, go out and get it. There's all kinds of great opportunity for you.
Well, the reason that matters so much, what you just said, Drex, is all 3 of us have lived that experience or been adjacent to it. Heck, it's happened to me twice, but I've also been on the receiving end in a good way of it. Like, hey, we're consolidating, we picked you. Next time, hey, we're consolidating and we didn't pick you. That space of your identity being tied to your role and all the things you've done in your career to get there, because all 3 of us have had those experiences in our lives, when people call us, when they say, hey, thank you for understanding what this felt like. Thank you for being the first phone a friend I had, or thank you for helping me prepare for that next opportunity. We've been there, and that empathy of just that career perspective, but us seeing the whole person makes such a difference. And I'm grateful. That's one of the things that being a part of the 229 community offers the people that are a part of it.
We're going to close on this. I will say this to CIOs. Drex is absolutely right on a majority of the people I've talked to that are moving from one to another that were pushed out or whatever, 90+% of the time, it has nothing to do with you. It's a very political environment that you work in. It's a lot like a football team when they bring in a new GM or a new coach. They like to have their own team. Those kinds of things happen at this level. And really, the new coach might not even spend a minute getting to learn who you are, what you've done, that kind of stuff. They just want to bring in their person. There's an awful lot of things that happen at that level that you'll never see, that all of a sudden you turn around and you've realized you've just been punched in the gut, and it is very personal. I will say this, having been out of it for some time, and you guys have been out of it for a little while now too, the thing you will miss about it, if you do not go back in, and I'm encouraging people to go back in, the amount of impact you will have in that role on your community, on people's lives, is unlike anything else, unlike any other role I've ever had in my career. I've been CIO other places. I've done some large things, but there's something about being the CIO of a health system when you go to a party and you start talking to somebody and they tell you their health story or whatever, or their kid's health story, or and I remember at least twice in the first like 6 months I was there, somebody goes, oh yeah, the sisters forgave our debt. Like our debt was blah, blah, blah. It was a lot. And they said they forgave our debt, and we had a child that we couldn't pay, and St. Joe's took care of us and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, this is different than beer, banks, and bombs, which is some of the other stuff I did in my career. I mean, this is rewarding stuff. This is good stuff. So I encourage people. It does hurt. Lick your wounds, like Drex talked about, but there's value in getting back in there, and we're here to support you guys on that. So that's our Newsday. Our Newsday, we didn't cover a news story. It sort of feels to me like we're in the middle of the news. We meet with people.
The unwritten news story. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we meet with people all the time. I'm not sure we need to read a news story. We can just tell you what's going on the front line. So I want to thank you guys, and good luck, Warriors. And you're not a Red Sox fan, are you?
I am a Red Sox fan. They're doing okay. I'm a Mariners fan, and they're actually doing really well right now. So
Go Dodgers.
Oh, geez. Well, I'm not, I'm a Cardinals fan, but that is not to be talked about. Oh man. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. That's all for now. Thanks for listening to Newsday. There's a lot happening in our industry, and while Newsday covers interesting stuff, another way to stay informed is by subscribing to our daily insights email, which delivers expertly curated health IT news straight to your inbox. Sign up at thisweekhealth.com/news. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.